Breaking news, Niger has signed a nuclear program deal with Russia, and now France is furious. They are now suing Niger.
It didn't begin with uranium. It didn't begin with contracts. It began with a nation daring to end dependency and reclaim its future. Niger signs $1 billion nuclear deal with Russia, a partnership that reshapes the continent's energy future. The agreement promises nuclear technology transfer and infrastructure development. For decades, France has controlled Niger's uranium wealth. French company Areva extracted billions in resources, while Niger remained impoverished. Now, that colonial grip is finally loosening. In the heart of the atom lies a power both ancient and futuristic. A power that can illuminate cities or reduce them to dust. This is the power of uranium, the volatile radioactive element that serves as the lifeblood for the world's nuclear reactors. It is the fuel of the 21st century, a cornerstone of modern civilization's insatiable demand for energy. The controlled, sustained reaction within these glowing cores provides a stream of electricity, a clean alternative to fossil fuels, yet one that carries with it an immense and heavy responsibility. The mastery of this element is a testament to human ingenuity, but the control of its source is a matter of pure, unadulterated geopolitical power. And at the very center of this global power struggle lies a nation forged in the heat of the Sahara. Deep beneath the sands of Niger, one of the poorest countries on Earth, lies one of the world's richest treasures, the highest-grade uranium ores ever discovered. For decades, this West African nation has been a silent giant in the nuclear industry, holding some of the planet's largest and most strategic uranium reserves. This geological lottery ticket should have been a path to prosperity, a means to build a nation and uplift its people. Instead, it became a resource curse, a source of wealth not for Niger, but for those who came to extract it. The story of Niger's uranium is a story of immense potential, overshadowed by a long history of exploitation, a modern fable of a nation sitting on a goldmine while its people live in poverty. The primary beneficiary of this paradox has been France, Niger's former colonial ruler. Through a web of post-colonial agreements and the operations of its state-controlled nuclear conglomerate, Orano, France secured a near monopoly on Niger's uranium for decades. This arrangement was the bedrock of France's nuclear independence and energy security. It is no exaggeration to say that the lights of Paris were kept on by the resources extracted from the deserts of Niger. An estimated 1 in every 3 light bulbs in France was powered by Nigerian uranium, a stark testament to a deeply unequal relationship. While France built a world-class nuclear energy sector, Niger remained at the bottom of the UN's Human Development Index. The price paid for its uranium was a fraction of the global market rate, a deal that enriched a foreign power while perpetuating a cycle of dependency and poverty at home. But the winds of change are blowing across the Sahel. The military coup of 2023 was not just a political upheaval, it was an economic earthquake. The new leadership in Niamey, channeling decades of popular resentment, moved to sever the colonial-era ties that had bound their nation's fate to France. They expelled the French ambassador, kicked out French troops, and, most critically, they went straight for the economic jugular. They revoked Orano's license to operate one of the world's largest uranium mines at Imuraran. This was more than a contract dispute. It was a declaration of resource sovereignty. It was a signal to the world that the old rules no longer applied. Niger was taking back control of its most precious asset. This bold move has thrown the global energy market into turmoil and redrawn the geopolitical map of Africa. Control of this resource means control of global energy security. With France pushed out, a vacuum has been created, and new powers are rushing to fill it. Russia, through its expanding influence in the region, sees an opportunity to undermine a NATO rival and gain leverage over the world's nuclear fuel supply. China, with its voracious appetite for energy to fuel its economic engine, is a patient and powerful potential partner. For the United States and the European Union, the instability in Niger represents a catastrophic failure of policy and a direct threat to their strategic interests. The fight for Niger's uranium is now a central arena in the new great power competition. For Niger, it is a high-stakes gamble for its future, a chance to finally profit from its own wealth, but also a risk of swapping one form of dependency for another. The fate of nations now hangs on the control of this glowing, powerful rock. Russia expands its influence across Africa's strategic sectors. Moscow offers technology and investment without colonial conditions. Rosatom brings nuclear expertise and promises of energy independence. France scrambles to maintain its African uranium monopoly. The European Union threatens sanctions and economic pressure. Washington warns of Russian influence destabilizing the region. Niger's leadership declares this is about independence, not alliances. The people support breaking free from neo-colonial exploitation. This represents Africa choosing its own partners and future. The deal promises thousands of jobs for Niger's workforce. Roads, power plants, and schools will transform the nation. Billions in revenue will flow directly to Niger's treasury. Since colonial times, uranium has been extracted for foreign benefit. While Niger remained poor, its uranium-powered European cities today marks the end of resource colonialism. Niger's decision was not a solitary act in a vacuum, it was a seismic event, a stone cast into the Great Lake of continental politics, and its ripples are now washing upon the shores of every African nation. This single, defiant move has become a catalyst, forcing a continent-wide re-evaluation of long-standing partnerships that have, for decades, defined Africa's relationship with the world. In the halls of the African Union and in presidential palaces from Dakar to Djibouti, a new conversation is taking place. It moves beyond polite diplomacy and cuts to the heart of true sovereignty. Leaders who once saw alignment with former colonial powers as the only path to stability are now witnessing a viable alternative, one forged not in Paris or London, but in Niamey. The question is no longer to partner with, but the old terms of engagement, tilted in favor of external interests, are being shredded. The inspiration is palpable. A quiet confidence spreading through the corridors of power, a realization that the continent's destiny need not be outsourced. This awakening is most pronounced in the nations blessed and cursed by the earth beneath their feet. Countries with vast reserves of oil, strategic minerals, and natural gas are watching Niger's bold move with intense focus. For generations, the story of Africa's resources has been a tragedy of extraction without benefit, a tale of immense wealth flowing outwards, leaving behind dependency. From the cobalt mines of the Congo, essential for the world's batteries, to the bauxite fields of Guinea and the oil-rich Niger Delta, the narrative has been the same. Africa provides the raw materials, and the world reaps the profits. But Niger's assertion of control over its uranium has flipped the script. It's a masterclass in leverage, demonstrating that resource wealth can be a tool for national empowerment, not a magnet for exploitation. Leaders and citizens are now asking tougher questions. Why export raw cobalt when we can build the battery factories here? Why sell crude oil at prices dictated by foreign markets when we can refine it for our own energy needs? This is the dawn of economic self-determination, a move to capture the entire value chain and finally break the resource curse. This economic recalibration is fueling a powerful resurgence of Pan-African solidarity. But this is not merely a nostalgic echo of the post-independence era. This is Pan-Africanism 2.0, a pragmatic, digitally connected, and youth-driven movement. It grows stronger, not just with grand political declarations, but with each act of sovereignty, each trade deal renegotiated, each assertion of national pride. The formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, uniting Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, is a potent symbol of this new direction, a security and economic pact built on shared destiny and mutual defense, independent of external frameworks. Across the continent, from the markets of Accra to the tech hubs of Nairobi, social media is ablaze with this new consciousness. Hashtags demanding resource sovereignty trend in multiple languages as young influencers deconstruct neo-colonial narratives for millions. They are connecting across borders, building a unified front that transcends the artificial lines drawn by colonizers. The flags of individual nations are now often flown alongside the red, black, and green, a visual testament to a growing belief. The strength of one is the strength of all. Naturally, this continental shift is causing considerable unease in the traditional centers of global power. In Western capitals, there is a scramble to react to a continent that is no longer content with a subordinate role. The old levers of influence, conditional aid and political pressure, are losing their potency against a backdrop of popular unified defiance. This has opened the door for other global players. Nations like Russia and China are presenting themselves as alternative partners, offering deals that, on the surface, appear to be based on non-interference. However, the architects of this new African strategy are acutely aware of the risks of simply swapping patrons. The ultimate goal is not to pivot from west to east, but to pivot inwards, towards Africa itself. The continent is leveraging this multipolar geopolitical landscape to its advantage, playing competing interests against each other to carve out the best possible terms for its people. Africa is no longer a chessboard for great power competition. It is becoming a player in its own right, with its own non-negotiable demands. What we are witnessing is more than a series of broken treaties. It is a fundamental reawakening, a tectonic shift in the global order. The ripples from Niger are transforming into a continental wave, washing away the last vestiges of a colonial mentality and forging a new identity built on strength and unity. Each sovereign decision, each renegotiated contract, each act of solidarity is a building block for a new era. This is the sound of a continent finding its voice, a powerful chorus demanding its rightful place in the world. The future is not just coming to Africa, the future is being built here, by Africans, for the benefit of all Africans and their descendants across the diaspora. The world has no choice but to watch, listen, and adapt, because a new power has truly begun to rise. In today's multipolar world, Africa chooses its own allies. The deal aligns with the Global South's push for independence. New partnerships reshape global trade and energy flows. The response was as swift as it was predictable. When a nation dares to reclaim what is rightfully its own, the old guard does not applaud. They constrict. Western powers, long accustomed to a world order that serves their interests, will now attempt to suffocate Niger's aspirations. The playbook is old, worn, but ruthlessly effective. Pressure, sanctions, and destabilization. We will see the full spectrum of economic warfare deployed. Financial sanctions designed to paralyze the state, to stop salaries from being paid, to turn the populace against its new leadership. The freezing of national assets held in foreign banks, a digital age heist where billions are held hostage to force compliance. Diplomatic channels, once filled with hollow pleasantries about partnership, will turn icy. Ambassadors will be recalled. Condemnations will be issued from the podiums of the United Nations and the European Union, and a narrative will be spun. One of chaos, of illegitimacy, of a nation spiraling into rogue status. They will weaponize regional bodies, turning brother against brother. ECOWAS, once a symbol of West African unity, will be pressured to become the enforcer, threatening military intervention and closing borders, strangling the flow of goods and people. This is the anatomy of modern-day imperial pressure, a multi-front assault designed not just to punish, but to make an example of Niger. To send a clear, chilling message to any other nation on the continent that might be watching, that might be dreaming of its own economic liberation. Stay in line, know your place. But they have fundamentally miscalculated the spirit of the moment. They have mistaken decades of forced silence for contentment. Niger stands firm, not merely as a government, but as a people. This is not a coup for power's sake. It is a revolution of consciousness. For generations, the people of Niger have lived a bitter paradox. Citizens of a nation unimaginably rich in the world's most strategic resource, yet ranked among the world's poorest. They have watched convoys carry their wealth out of the desert to power the cities of Europe, while their own villages remained in darkness. This firmness is born from that lived experience. It is the collective will of a nation that has decided the cost of the status quo is far greater than the risk of change. The sanctions are not a surprise. they are the expected reaction of a system being challenged. The threats of intervention are not a deterrent, they are a confirmation that their actions have struck a nerve. In the streets of Niamey, you do not see fear, you see resolve. You see a generation that is digitally connected, historically aware, and unburdened by the colonial cringe of their predecessors. They understand the stakes. They know the road ahead will be difficult, paved with the obstacles the West will surely place in their path. But they also know that the road behind them leads only to continued subservience. And so, they stand firm in their sovereign choice, because for the first time, the choice is truly their own. To understand this moment, you must understand the myth they constructed. The myth that Niger's uranium would, and should, always belong to the West. It was a story written not in ink, but in extraction contracts and geopolitical dominance. Since the 1970s, the desert sands of northern Niger, particularly around the towns of Arlit and Akokan, have been the source of France's nuclear independence. The French state-controlled company, now called Orano, operated with near-total impunity, a state within a state. They called it a partnership, but the terms were those of a master and a servant. Niger provided the land, the labor, and the raw material. France dictated the price. For decades, Niger was forced to sell its high-grade uranium at prices far below the global market rate, a colonial discount baked into the very fabric of their relationship. The profits generated were astronomical, powering 1 in 3 light bulbs in France, fueling its nuclear arsenal and cementing its status as a world power. And what did Niger receive in return? A pittance. Royalties that amounted to a fraction of the true value, barely enough to keep the state afloat, but never enough to allow it to flourish. The environmental and human cost was even steeper. Radioactive dust settled over communities. Water sources were contaminated. Miners and their families suffered from mysterious illnesses, the slow-motion violence of radiation poisoning, a cost never factored into Orano's balance sheets. This was the arrangement. French lights burned bright, while Niger's people were left with the dark legacy of contamination and poverty. They thought this system was permanent. They believed Niger, dependent on French aid and military presence, would never dare to sever the umbilical cord. They thought the uranium, by virtue of history and power, was theirs. They thought Niger would never choose its own path. This was their most critical error. They viewed Niger not as a sovereign entity with its own ambitions, but as a passive square on the grand chessboard of global influence. They failed to see that the world was changing, that the unipolar moment was over, and that new powers were rising, offering alternatives to the old colonial dependencies. Niger's decision to pivot, to explore partnerships with nations like Russia and Iran, is not an embrace of a new master. It is a declaration that they will no longer have a master at all. It is strategic diversification. This new path is about reclaiming agency. It's about entering the global market not as a supplicant, but as a seller with a high-demand product. It's about negotiating contracts that reflect the true value of their resources, with royalties and joint venture structures that ensure the wealth generated from Nigerian soil is invested back into Nigerian infrastructure, schools, and hospitals. The ultimate vision extends far beyond simply selling raw ore to the highest bidder. The true revolution lies in the ambition to move up the value chain, to one day build their own processing plants, to enrich their own uranium, and, most audaciously, to construct their own nuclear power plants. Imagine it, a Niger that is not just an exporter of energy potential, but a generator of actual power. A nation that could light up every home, power a new wave of industry, and even export electricity to its neighbors, forging a new kind of Pan-African integration built on shared energy independence. This is the path they are choosing. It is fraught with risk, and the old powers will fight it at every turn. But it is a path that leads towards a future where Niger is the master of its own destiny. For so long, the glow of uranium was a symbol of wealth being stolen, a light that shone brightly in foreign capitals while casting a dark shadow over its land of origin. But today, that glow is being reclaimed. Today, the future glows with the incandescent promise of sovereignty. It is the light of a new dawn breaking over the Sahel. A light that illuminates a path not just for Niger, but for all of Africa. It is a testament to the idea that a nation's resources are its birthright, not a commodity for foreign powers to claim. This is the new narrative being written in real time. A story of courage, of defiance, and of a continent awakening to its own immense power. The journey will be long, and the forces of the old world will not yield easily. But the first, most difficult step has been taken. The decision to stand up and say, no more. The future is not something to be waited for. It is something to be built, to be powered, to be owned. This is Inside Africa, where we document the moments the world shifts on its axis, where Africa's power is no longer borrowed, no longer begged for, no longer negotiated away in unfair deals. It is reclaimed, it is redefined, and it is, finally, being built.